As requested by some of my viewers, I'm going to be comparing the Surface Laptop 3 versus the new MacBook Air 2020. And I'll give my thoughts and reasonings on what device you should get if you are in the market between these two products, because they are similar in price. But before I get started, I just want to say that if you are new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe if you want to see more tech content. If you like the video, please make sure to like. And if you have any questions on both of these products, please let me know down in the comments below. But to get started, I'm going to talk about the unlocking features and the display. So I'm going to turn around real quick and then we'll get back to the regular review. So starting off with the ports on the MacBook Air, we have a single headphone jack on one side. And then on the other side, we have two Thunderbolt 3 ports working at full speed, which is really nice. And then on the Surface Laptop, which is going to be interesting, we have the power adapter that is proprietary. And then we have a USB-A, USB-C that is not Thunderbolt, and a headphone jack. But what I want you guys to also realize is with the power adapter that comes with the Surface Laptop, you actually get another USB port. So I think that's a pretty good addition, something that's often overlooked. And I would say for your typical consumer, since USB-C is still relatively new and not many devices are using it yet, that most people are probably going to love the regular USB-A ports, but it is nice that you're going to be future-proofing yourself. You're just going to have to deal with a little bit more dongles or adapters if you do decide to go with the MacBook Air. So I'm going to quickly go into the unlocking features on both these laptops. They're really nice. On the Windows laptop, we have Windows Hello, so all you have to do is open up, look at the screen, and you're in. Whereas on the MacBook lineup, we have to use Touch ID, which is still good, but when you go from using facial recognition back to fingerprint, you really see the benefits of using facial recognition instead. If you do have an Apple Watch, you can unlock your Mac with the Apple Watch, and I would say it probably takes about the same amount of time, but do consider that you do have to purchase an Apple Watch and have a MacBook that's compatible to do that. So now moving on to the display differences. You'll notice that the Surface Laptop is a little bit taller. That's because the aspect ratio on there is 3:2. And if you're curious about the resolution, it's 2256 by 1504. And on the MacBook, we have a 16:10 aspect ratio with a 2560 by 1600 resolution. Now, one thing you have to note, and I'll show you guys that the brightness is on max. And I've also turned off True Tone technology on the MacBook Air just to make sure that the color representation is going to be pretty much default. So what you're gonna notice is that the Surface Laptop is a little bit brighter. And another thing you have to note is that this screen is touchscreen. So you will notice a little bit more fingerprints on the screen if you do touch the screen a lot. Whereas on the MacBook Air has more, since you're not gonna be touching the screen as much, there's not gonna be as much fingerprints on there. But personally, I would still elect to go with the Surface Laptop because I can use it outdoors a lot easier. So just keep that in mind. So coming to the build quality of both these two devices, they're extremely good. They're all aluminum on the outside. But I will say, even though the MacBook Air on paper is lighter, something I want to say is the Surface Laptop to me feels lighter. I don't know if that's because of the surface area, whereas on the MacBook Air, it feels more dense, but they're both still very light devices. So I don't think carrying around either of these devices are going to be a pain for most people. The design on both these devices, the Surface Laptop is a little bit more boxy, whereas on the MacBook Air, it has a more wedge-shaped design. And I've noticed when typing and putting my hands on the palm rest, it's a lot less straining on my wrist. So I would say that the build quality barely goes over to the MacBook Air. Moving on to the actual internals, they're both using the 10th generation i5 quad-core processors by Intel. I'm gonna try and remember this as best I can, but I believe in the Surface Laptop, it's the i5 1030 G7, and then on the MacBook Air, we have the 1035 NG7. They're both good, but you get a little bit more performance in the Surface Laptop. I would show benchmark scores, but like I said, in most of my reviews, they're important. But when it comes to day-to-day use, benchmarks don't really matter. I would say in day-to-day use, they're pretty much the same, but you do get more performance on paper for the Surface laptop, so keep that in mind, about 30% more performance. You get 8 gigabytes of RAM in both these devices. They're both soldered, so you can't upgrade the RAM. The storage is, the base model on the MacBook Air is 256, whereas on the Surface laptop, it's 128. But I want to give it over to the Surface laptop in terms of the storage, because you can upgrade it to pretty much whatever you want. It just has to be an M.2 slot. And it really does suck that you have to pay for that up front on Apple and you're pretty much stuck with it. So I'm gonna give the storage over to the Surface laptop. Moving on to the Wi-Fi, it might not be that important to you guys because I don't know who has a Wi-Fi 6 in their house yet, but Surface laptop does have Wi-Fi 6 or 802.11ax, whereas on the MacBook Air, you have the 802.11ac Wi-Fi 5. But if you don't even know what Wi-Fi 6 or AX is, then it doesn't really matter. But for those of you who do know, the Wi-Fi 6 is better than the Wi-Fi 5, obviously by the numerical numbers. Okay, moving on to the keyboard. The keyboards are both good. In both my unboxing videos, I was thoroughly impressed. However, I will say after using both these laptops day to day, I like the MacBook Air a little bit more. It has a more click feeling at the end of my key travel, whereas on the Surface laptop, it's a little bit mushy. And I think the buttons are a little bit more concaved on the MacBook Air as well, so it rests easy on my finger. But I would say that both typing experiences are really good. Keyboards are subjective from person to person, but I would say for the vast majority of people, the keyboards are going to be good for you. All right, so I'm gonna show you guys a clip of the internal mic and camera of both these devices. And I will say they both look pretty good during the daytime. However, once you get into a darker setting, it does get a little bit grainy, so keep that in mind when viewing these clips. All right, this is the camera quality on the MacBook Air 2020, and this is how the microphone sounds, so you guys can tell me in the comments below which one sounds better. All right, so this is the recording on the Surface Laptop 3. You guys can tell me how you think the quality is of the camera and the microphone. All right, now I'm also gonna show you guys a speaker test and you guys can tell me which one you think is better.
Another thing I really liked about the iPad is that I felt like I could use it pretty much anywhere. And I found it most comfortable just laying on the couch or first thing in the morning in bed. And media consumption on this thing, watching YouTube videos, Netflix, the speakers are really, really good. So another thing I really liked about the iPad is that I felt like I could use it pretty much anywhere. And I found it most comfortable just laying on the couch or first thing in the morning in bed. And media consumption on this thing, watching YouTube videos, Netflix, the speakers are really, really good. Much better than what I expected.
Wrapping things up, I wanted to, I almost forgot about the trackpad in both these devices. So on the Surface laptop, we have a glass surface, and as you move close to the bottom of the trackpad, you'll be able to click down further. So that's really nice. I had no problems with this trackpad. It's actually much bigger than what they had in the 2019 model. And then moving on to the trackpad inside the MacBook Air. If you have used the MacBook, you know how amazing their trackpads are. And on this 2020 model, they have the haptic feedback. So you actually don't physically press down. It's actually sending haptic feedback back into the trackpad. And it does take a little bit of getting used to, but once you get used to it, trust me, you'll love it. I'm gonna have to give it to the MacBook Air in this instance because it's just a really good trackpad. But that's not to discredit the trackpad on the Surface laptop. It is really good, but just doing a comparison test, I would say that the MacBook Air has a better trackpad. And so now, finally, I want to talk about who should buy these devices, especially if you are a student, because they're pretty much made for students or like education purposes. And I would say that if you have an Apple product or devices, it's really hard to convince you to go to a Windows laptop or the dark side, as some people say. So I would say just go ahead and get the MacBook Air if you have a lot of light workloads, because you're getting all those extra functionalities with being inside the Apple ecosystem that you wouldn't get with the Windows laptop. But if you don't really care about that stuff or you don't have a lot of Apple products, just go ahead and get the Surface laptop. It's a really good product. It's probably, I want to say, my top 3 products I would recommend in terms of laptops for students. But I will say, If you absolutely need macOS, then this is probably one of your only few choices to look at. So you're probably gonna have to opt in to get the MacBook Air. But that's gonna do it for me today, guys. If you did like the content, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Like I said, if you have any questions, please let me know down in the comments below. I'll try to answer them as best as I can. And stay safe and much love. See ya.